Hello everyone, my name is Karrie Korroch. Lots of you know me from coming to the East Lansing Public Library, and I am a children's librarian here, and outside of the library I am also a professional storyteller. I'm going to talk with you today about 5 things you can do to prepare for telling a story and doing it the best way that you can. You always want to do your best. The first part we're going to talk about is your voice. And your voice is the most important tool you have as a storyteller. You're going to want to think about your voice in a slightly different way than you usually do. You talk all day long with your friends and your family, and you probably don't think a lot about your voice. But as a storyteller, you have to think about your voice and you want to pay attention to it. So we want to think about the volume of our voice, how loud we're talking when we tell a story. We want to think about how quickly we're talking, slowly enough so the audience can absorb what they're hearing from you. It's very important too. So the second thing you really want to think about, number 2, as a storyteller, is that you want to pay very close attention to the content of your story, or what your story is about. In this case, what we are proposing to you or asking you to do is to tell a story from your own life. So you don't need to learn someone else's story. You don't need to make up a story with characters that you have to remember. You're going to tell a story about yourself from your own life. So that makes it a little bit easier to think about what you are using as content for your story. Number 3 is to know the parts of a story. So when I get ready to tell a story, I don't memorize a story. I don't have to remember certain words and certain things that happened at certain times in the story, because what happens if I do that is I spend time looking at the floor while I'm telling a story, or looking at the ceiling, or thinking, oh, what happens next? I can't remember. And then I'm distracted, and getting distracted while you're telling a story makes it very difficult for the audience to listen to you. So you don't need to think about memorizing anything. What you want to think about is how the story starts, what happens in the middle, and how the story ends. So one thing I do as a storyteller is I make a map for myself. I draw a map on a piece of paper, and I have circles with arrows that go between them that show me what happens when. I also have a list of characters in the story, and I think about it that way, so I know the big things that have to happen in the story, and I know the order in which they happen, and that's all I really need to remember. Part number 4 is taking care of your audience, and you want to think very carefully about who is listening to you. When you tell a story to your friends on the playground, you're probably going to tell that story very differently than maybe you tell that story to your parents, or you tell that story to your grandparents, or you tell that story, you might even tell the same story differently to different friends. So you need to think about who is listening to your story. You're not telling a story just for yourself, you're telling a story for an audience. That way your story doesn't sound like a speech to the audience, and it doesn't sound like something you memorized, because it's more like hanging out with your friends and sharing a story with them. Another way to take care of your audience is to think about how your story is going to end, to consider what you want your audience to remember about your story. What is important about your story? And why does your story matter to you? You want to be ready for your ending and prepared for it so that your story doesn't end with the end. Just think about when the people walk away from you, what you want them to remember about the story that you told. So that also helps us think a little bit about part number 5, which is to prepare for your story. The best way is to tell your story to your friends, and tell your story to your family, and tell your story to your teachers and your grandparents. You can come to the library and tell stories to librarians. Lots of people will want to listen to your story, but the more you tell it, the easier it will be for you to share it and to feel comfortable. So those are my 5 things I wanted to share with you, and I hope that they help you get ready for telling a story and feeling just absolutely great about it. Thank you so much.